It all began on a brisk Monday morning in Washington, D.C. The news arrived before most hosts had even taken the first sip of their morning coffee. Federal authorities detain Elon Musk in voter fraud investigation. The headline read like a story too crazy to be true. Elon Musk, the tech titan, the billionaire entrepreneur, the founder of SpaceX and Tesla, had just been arrested in relation to a single felonious ballot. The charge? Voting in the most recent U.S. election as a non-citizen. Within moments, every TV station in America had switched gears. Live video showed federal agents leading Musk from a building. No cuffs, no fuss, just a calm, poised man in a black turtleneck and charcoal jacket walking solemnly toward a waiting vehicle. Social media erupted. Was it a joke? A smear campaign? A deep fake? But by noon, it was confirmed by a Department of Justice spokesman. Mr. Musk is at present being held for questioning. This is the first arrest of a non-citizen for voting in 2024 U.S. election. What no one expected, however, was what Musk said next. And because his cameras flooded the courthouse and speculation raged like wildfire, Elon approached the podium, cleared his throat, and told the world something that would reverberate across the nation. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had assembled. Reporters, protesters, supporters, skeptics. The atmosphere was rife with confusion and rage. Was this political theater, a mistake, or something much more serious? Then, just after 3 p.m., Elon Musk appeared, surrounded by lawyers and federal agents. But rather than being hurried to a black SUV, he walked straight to the microphones. No script, no prepared statement, just Elon, calm, but obviously shaken. "I voted," he said simply. "I shouldn't have. I knew it wasn't legal. But I did it anyway." Gasps swept through the crowd. Reporters stopped in their tracks, hands raised above keyboards. This wasn't a denial. It was a confession. "I've been living in this country for decades," Elon said. "I built companies, employed thousands, paid billions in taxes, but when I stood in that booth last November, I wasn't Elon Musk, billionaire. I was a man who thought that this country was already home to me." He paused. "I knew it wasn't allowed, but I also knew what I meant to me. I wasn't trying to rig anything. I wasn't trying to cheat. I just wanted a voice." The silence was deafening. Then came the firestorm. Live cable news anchors cut in. Commentators rushed to provide context for the moment. But what Elon said next only amplified the horror. "If you want to punish me, I understand that. But maybe it's time we started asking those questions. Who gets to belong in this country and why?" Footage of Elon Musk's courthouse speech played on every major network for the following 48 hours. Pundits dissected his words. Politicians from both sides of the aisle lined up to publish statements. Social media split as if an earthquake had cleaved the country in two. To some, Musk's behavior was inexcusable, an arrogant billionaire who acted like the rules didn't apply to him. "He violated the law," one congressman said. "That's not courage, that's criminal entitlement." But for some, he had become something unexpected, a symbol. A voice for millions of immigrants who worked and paid taxes and raised families, but had no say on the most basic right of all, who their leaders would be. Elon didn't hide. He didn't tweet jokes. He sat for interview with a solemn tone that America had never seen from him. "I'm not seeking forgiveness," he said. "I'm asking for reflection. We allow people like me to invest in this country, build in this country, even shape its future through technology, but not at the ballot box. And I get that. But maybe it's time to reimagine the lines." On the sidewalk outside the courthouse, signs started popping up. "I pay, I serve, I belong." Voices without votes, and quietly, those who had never spoken out before, started writing their stories. 3 days later, Elon's arrest wasn't merely a news headline. It was the headline. Everywhere. Cable debates ran non-stop. Church pulpits rang with sermons on citizenship and grace. University classrooms shuffled lesson plans. And across America, dinner table conversations became emotional. Some were furious. "He broke the law. Why should he get a pass simply because he's Elon Musk?" Some were silent, contemplative. "He pays more taxes than 10 towns put together. He's raised kids here. Isn't that American enough? And still others, immigrants and green card holders in particular, sensed something deeper awaken, something personal. Across cities from Los Angeles to Atlanta, small, spontaneous rallies broke out with handwritten signs. Some held pictures of fathers who had been deported. Others held up tax documents. One boy held a sign that said simply, "My mom is American in every sense of the word, except for voting." Meanwhile, Elon didn't tweet a peep on X. Instead, he asked for a hearing, not only to confront the charge, but to speak publicly under oath about why he did what he did. His lawyers were hesitant. The government was skeptical, but the judge, possibly sensing just how heavy what this case had become, did. The date was set, and the nation held its breath to see how Elon Musk would respond, this time, from the witness stand. The courtroom was filled. Journalists, legal scholars, even celebrities. Some lined up overnight just to get a seat. Cameras were prohibited from entering, but a dozen sketch artists were already filling pages with thick lines and shadows. When Elon Musk took the stand, he did not seem like a mogul or a genius. He looked tired. The judge instructed him to raise his right hand. He did. Then came the questions, clear, deliberate. "Mr. Musk, are you a U.S. citizen?" "No." "Did you vote in the last U.S. election knowing that you were ineligible?" "Yes." Gasps ran through the courtroom. But Elon didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer to the microphone and said, "And I would do it again. Not because I think I'm above the law, but because I believe the law forgot people like me." That line jarred like a thunderclap. Then he told his story. Not the one recorded on Wikipedia, the one never heard, how he arrived in the U.S. with a backpack, how he crashed on couches and survived on ramen while creating Zip2, how he reinvested every dime in companies that now hire more than 100,000 Americans, how his children recite the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, yet he still checks a box that says, "Alien, I have given everything to this country," he said in a low voice, "except my vote." And that felt unbearable. The courtroom was silent. The judge cleared his throat, shaken. And outside, the nation waited, because something was changing. The courtroom afterward was suffused with thick silence. Even the judge, who was known for a strict emphasis on procedure, did not respond immediately. He took off his glasses, stared at the papers in front of him, and then turned to Musk, not in anger but in curiosity. "Mr. Musk," the judge asked, "do you understand why the law prohibits non-citizens from voting?" "Yes, Your Honor," Elon answered, "because voting is power, and power, in a democracy, is held by those who are citizens." The judge nodded slowly. "And yet, you still did it." "I did," Musk said, "because I understood that after all I'd done for this country, I was still considered an outsider. I wasn't voting to alter the outcome. I voted to feel human." That word, human, lingered in the air like incense. The gallery squirmed. One woman in the back dabbed tears from her eyes. The judge leaned forward. "You know that this court cannot forgive you for what you did." "I'm not asking for that," Musk replied. "I'm asking you to reconsider who we are, who we include, and who we tell to be quiet." The judge did not immediately respond. Instead, he stared at his bench and then at the courtroom. "This hearing," he said slowly, "will be more than sentencing, because I think what we've heard today requires a national conversation." The courtroom exploded, not in cheers or outrage, but in shocked incredulity, because what had begun as a case about a single illegal vote had just become something far, far larger. By the time Elon Musk emerged from the courthouse, the outside world had shifted. What had been a mob of protesters and skeptics was softening into something else. A gawking, nervous silence. Microphones were held out. Reporters shouted questions. But Elon said nothing. A mere nod, and he was gone, disappeared into a black car, the door closing softly after him. That evening, the judge's words echoed through every major network. "This hearing will be more than a sentencing, because what we've heard today calls for a national conversation." And it began immediately. Some lawmakers on Capitol Hill described Musk's speech as a dangerous justification of criminal behavior. Others quietly reported that it had given them pause. In immigrant communities, terse-cheeked people sat around kitchen tables. Opa, abuela, dreamers, they at last felt seen. Not from pity, but because with a global microphone someone had said aloud what they'd held for years. I gave everything, but I still wasn't allowed to belong. Even the late-night hosts put away the jokes to seriously discuss it. I don't care whether you love or hate Elon Musk. That testimony? That was real. The next morning, a poll shocked pundits. American voters expressed a lack of support for the most extreme candidate positions on this issue. 63% said they favor opening the door to voting rights for long-term legal residents. The shock was not just in Musk's arrest. It was in what happened next. People listened. In the days that followed, something unplanned started to happen. People who had never spoken out in public about immigration or voting began telling their stories across the country. A nurse in Phoenix shared a video. I've paid taxes for 22 years. I have a son in the military, but I was never allowed to vote. Elon Musk just stated what so many of us know. A father in Seattle wrote a letter to his local paper. I'm here legally. I built a business. I coach Little League. But I do stay home on election day because I'm not American enough. Soon, this hashtag began to trend. Stay home one election day. Thousands joined in. And legislation that had been stuck for years, proposals to forge a path to citizenship for long-term permanent residents, suddenly came out from the cold. Lawmakers were compelled to react, and there were Senate hearings announced, panels convened, networks ran town halls. And at the center of it all was a man who had built rockets to Mars, only to take a turn and find himself orbiting something much more powerful, the hope of inclusion. Elon Musk was still being charged. He had not been pardoned or exonerated, but his story was no longer his story alone. It was about what the nation had not done, and an ever-growing number of people were beginning to ask, what does it really mean to belong in America? The pressure had become too big to ignore. It was a nightly headline everywhere, the Musk trial. Editorials poured forth, some lauding Elon's courage, others cautioning of a dangerous precedent. Then one morning we learned of a presidential press conference. Anticipation buzzed on the White House lawn. The President Trump, with his advisors beside him, walked up to the podium and repositioned the microphone. He didn't begin with legalese. He started with a story. My grandfather came to this country with a suitcase and a dream. He built a life here. He raised a family. But he didn't vote, not once, because the law never offered him the opportunity. He paused, surveying the crowd. Elon Musk broke the law. That cannot be ignored. But he also reflected a mirror back to our country, and in that reflection, many found themselves. Namely, Trump floated a new idea, a Civic Pathway Act, a bill that would allow green card holders who had lived in the U.S. for over a decade, were paying taxes and passed a civics knowledge test to have voting rights. It wasn't blanket amnesty. It did not confer immediate citizenship. But it was indeed a conversation, one supported by the highest office in the land. The room was silent for a beat, then burst into questions, and around the country one text buzzed across phones. Did y'all hear what the Trump just said? As the nation grappled with the president's proposal, Elon Musk was nowhere to be found. No tweets, no interviews, no public appearances. His lawyers have issued only one statement. Mr. Musk remains committed to cooperating fully with the judicial process and is thankful that the country is having the dialogue that he hoped to have. But only behind the scenes was Elon not hiding. He was thinking. One afternoon, a rare photograph appeared. Elon sitting quietly at a small community center in downtown Detroit. No press, no security detail, just him and a group of immigrant parents listening. A woman next to him got to keep a wrinkles envelope from the Department of Homeland Security. She hadn't waited 17 years for an interview for citizenship. I clean hospitals, she said, but I've never had a say on taxes that they pull out of my paycheck. Elon didn't speak. He just nodded, eyes focused. A volunteer took a blurry snapshot of the moment and posted it with the caption, "He came here not to talk, but to listen." It went viral within hours. Because as the media wrestled with legality and policy and precedent, Elon Musk had moved on to something deeper: the people. And with each unspoken meeting, each untold story he now housed in his heart, the movement he started only grew stronger. 3 weeks later, they returned to the courtroom. Elon Musk strolled in through the side door, dressed in a plain navy suit. No flashy tie, no entourage, just the silent intensity of someone who knew what was next required of him. The judge walked in soon after, his expression inscrutable. The atmosphere was crackling with tension, not the ruckus of protest, but the sort of still, hushed energy that only comes before history. "Mr. Musk," the judge said, "you still stand charged with unlawfully participating in a federal election as a non-citizen. Do you have anything to say before I'm sentenced?" Elon stood. "I do," he said, "but not to defend myself." He turned toward the gallery. Benches were filled with dozens of immigrant families. Others sported #1 "I Stay Home on Election Day" pins. Some held small flags, others just watched quietly, their stories written on their faces. "I broke the law," Elon said, "and I will face the consequences. But I ask this court and this country to remember why I did it." He paused. "I voted because I believed in America so much I risked being told I didn't belong to it." The judge scrutinized him, then spoke slowly. "This court finds you guilty." Gasps, whispers, but the judge raised a hand. "And yet, you actions have brought us to a moment larger than this room." The court held its collective breath. Elon remained frozen, the word guilty still hanging in the air. But then the judge went on. "Given your cooperation, your record, and the national conversation you've started here, this court sentences you to 100 hours of public civic engagement." The room stirred. Some looked confused. Others leaned forward. "You will do those hours by working with immigration communities directly, talking not about space or technology, but about belonging, about law, about the perils of unbroken it, and the bravery to oppose it with your voice, not your vote." It was unprecedented. No jail time, no fine. "You are a sentence of education-based nature." Elon nodded slowly. "I accept." Outside, the media went wild. Judge gives symbolic sentence. Elon Musk will work with immigrant communities following trial. Musk, guilty, but now a messenger? Supporters stood outside the courthouse steps with homemade signs. Voice before vote. Belonging can't be banned. And of course, critics also had a say. Soft on crime, read some news accounts. Celebrity privilege. But for the families watching, the ones who had feared speaking out, feared deportation, feared even being seen, this was something different altogether. It was the first time the system was cleared not only for punishment, but for understanding. And Elon Musk was eager to get started. Unlike other sentences, Elon Musk's wasn't served behind bars. It was served face to face. He started his civic engagement quietly. No fanfare, no camera crews, one community center, one town hall, one cafeteria at a time. In East Los Angeles, he sat at a plastic table facing high school students whose parents had crossed borders so that one day they might vote. "Why did you do it, Mr. Musk?" asked a 17-year-old named Diego. "You knew it was illegal." Elon nodded. "Because I have gotten tired of paying attention to politics and not having a voice. But what I learned was even more powerful. Your voice is strongest when you listen first." In Atlanta, he toured a church basement where volunteers led citizenship classes. He dished out coffee, fielded questions, and listened to one mother explain how she had waited 19 years for a green card, only to be told she would now have to wait an additional 10 years. In Houston, he stood among a body of naturalized citizens bearing miniature flags. He didn't give a speech. All he said, "I'm just here to learn." The proverbial hand went up. "Do you still wish you could vote?" Elon smiled. "Yes, but now I realize voting is the conclusion, not the outset of the process. The beginning is showing up." And that's what he did, again and again. What started as a simple sentencing requirement grew into something much larger. It wasn't merely hours to complete that Elon's visits required. It turned into events that filled community centers, school auditoriums, and attracted people from all walks of life, citizens and non, to show up. Not that he was a billionaire, but now that he was reachable. He started one effort called Voices Before Votes, a nonprofit that, among other things, helped long-term residents understand their rights, their pathways to citizenship, and how to have their voices heard before they ever saw a ballot box. He enlisted volunteers from coast to coast, teachers, lawyers, former dreamers. They accompanied him on travels, conducted workshops, facilitated translated materials, listened. At one event in Chicago, a 13-year-old girl named Salma stood before hundreds and said, "Do you think a person like me who was brought here as a baby can still be a leader?" Elon stepped up, knelt down next to her and said, "You already are. You told you to stand up and ask that question. That's what leaders do." The video became a viral hit within hours. Again. But this time it wasn't controversy. It was courage. And all over the country people started to wonder, if Elon Musk went from arrest to reframing the conversation, what could they do? A statue was unveiled in a small park just outside Washington, D.C., 1 year after the arrest of Elon Musk. It wasn't of Elon. It was a bronze sculpture of a young girl sitting on top of a stack of books, one hand in the air as if she were asking a question. Etched into stone at her feet were these words, "You already are a leader." The quote had been directed at Salma. But now, it belonged to millions. Communities around the country had transformed. Free citizenship workshops were offered by churches. Tech companies donated time and money to help immigrants prep for interviews. And so voter education programs proliferated, fueled by those who could still not vote, but wanted others to with heart. And Elon? He remained quiet. His hours have been logged long ago. But he kept visiting, uninvited, youth groups, mosques, classrooms, border towns. At a televised event commemorating the anniversary of his case, a reporter asked, "Mr. Musk, would you do it all again?" Elon paused. "I wouldn't vote illegally again. That was wrong. But I would speak up again. I would take the risk again. Because I learned something." He looked at the camera. Citizenship is more than a piece of paper. It's a vow. To show up, to care, to fight for those still waiting in line. The nation didn't simply listen to those words, it believed them.